The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, revealing the polished marble floor of the 42nd level at Blackstone Tower. Danielle Brooks stepped out, adjusting the strap of her cleaning kit over one shoulder. She had cleaned dozens of penthouses before, but this one exuded a kind of cold wealth that made her stomach tighten. It wasn't just the silence that greeted her. It was the emptiness, the lack of warmth like a museum display behind glass. Danielle was 32, with calm eyes that had seen too much to be easily rattled. 5 years working for Prestige Home Services had trained her in discretion, precision, and patience. Still, something about working in Preston Blackstone's residence unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the way the air always felt thick, as if the walls themselves were watching. She walked through the grand living room, floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, not a cushion out of place. Everything was sterile perfection. She moved quietly, pulling out her supplies and beginning her usual routine. Dusting, wiping, organizing. Her fingers knew what to do, even as her mind stayed alert. That's when the voice came sharp, loud, and accusing. "Where's my Rolex, Danielle?" Froze cloth in hand, the voice boomed from the hallway like thunder rolling across glass. Then came the footsteps, fast, heavy, deliberate. Preston Blackstone entered the room, his jaw clenched, his eyes like steel. "You were in the closet this morning," he said, voice rising. "You're the only one who's been in there today." Danielle turned to face him, wiping her hands calmly on the rag. "Mr. Blackstone, I haven't seen your watch. If it helps ease your mind, you're welcome to check my bag." Preston's eyes narrowed. "Don't patronize me. That watch is a $50,000 Submariner, and you expect me to believe it just vanished." Danielle stood still, her spine straight. She knew this game had played it too many times in homes where being the help made her an easy suspect. "I'm only offering transparency," she replied evenly. "If there's been a misunderstanding, we can let security sort it out." "Oh, I intend to," he snapped, pulling out his phone. "People like you think you can just walk into someone's life and take what doesn't belong to you." Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, but her voice remained steady. "And people like you think accusations make you powerful." Just then a cry pierced through the room. A child, desperate, not just fussy, coming from one of the back bedrooms. Danielle's head turned. Preston didn't even flinch. "Your son's crying," she said, already stepping away from her supplies. "The nanny's in charge of that," he muttered, waving her off. But the cry grew louder, raw, aching, relentless. Danielle hesitated. She knew the rules: stay in designated areas, never enter private rooms, but something primal tugged at her. That cry wasn't just discomfort, it was distress. Without waiting for permission, she followed the sound. Inside the nursery, the sight stopped her breath. The baby, no more than 6 months old, lay red-faced and soaked in a soiled diaper. No nanny in sight. His crib was bare, and his tiny fists beat at the air as he screamed. Danielle's heart broke in an instant. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, stepping in. "It's okay." She reached down, gently lifted the child, and checked his diaper. It was long overdue for a change. Within minutes, she had him cleaned, cradled in her arms, and cooing softly. The transformation was immediate. His tiny body relaxed, his cries faded to hiccups, and soon he rested his head on her shoulder, breathing steady. A sharp voice cracked the moment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Preston stood in the doorway, phone still in hand. Danielle didn't flinch. She turned slowly and began to hand the baby over. But as soon as Preston's arms touched the child, the baby began screaming again, twisting, crying, inconsolable. Preston frowned, trying to rock him, bounce him, hush him. Nothing worked. Danielle spoke softly without accusation. "Babies sense energy. When someone's tense or angry, they feel it." He looked at her, confused, defensive. "Are you saying I'm a bad father?" She shook her head. "I'm just saying your son calmed down with me. That's all." For a brief moment, the arrogance in Preston's eyes flickered. There was something else, something almost like recognition, but it passed, replaced quickly by a cold stare. "Well," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "how convenient. The same woman who calms babies also knows how to make luxury watches disappear." Danielle inhaled slowly, centering herself. She'd been here before, not this apartment, but this moment. The moment where truth bent under the weight of assumption. But this time she wasn't going to bend. Danielle looked Preston square in the eyes. If you truly believe I stole your watch, then please call the police. I'll wait right here. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp, unwavering. For a man like Preston, that kind of defiance coming from someone he had already sized up as beneath him was unexpected and threatening. For a long second, he didn't respond. Maybe he was recalibrating. Maybe he thought intimidation would work better than logic. But when Danielle turned her back to return the baby to the crib, something shifted in the air. The room wasn't his anymore. He could feel it, and it made him furious. I'll have your agency blacklist you, he snapped. I'll tell every client you're a thief. You'll never work again. Danielle didn't even turn around. And I'll tell them what really happened. The truth has a way of following people, Mr. Blackstone, just like shadows. He blinked, caught off guard. The confidence in her tone, the sheer composure, it unnerved him. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't scared. She was certain. Then with mechanical precision, she resumed folding the blanket near the crib as if nothing had happened. You seem very sure of yourself for someone who's about to be arrested, he muttered. I'm sure because I have nothing to hide, she replied, still not looking at him. But you might want to check your pockets. Or your car. That watch didn't just vanish. Her words landed like quiet grenades. Preston didn't respond. Not right away. His fingers tightened around the phone, but he didn't press call. Instead, he watched her pack up her supplies. Everything folded neatly labeled, placed exactly as it had been. The same way she'd worked in every home before his. Danielle had cleaned enough penthouses to know how men like Preston operated, always assuming their world was the only one that mattered, that no one beneath them could ever be smart enough, prepared enough, dangerous enough to fight back. What he didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that before Danielle came to the U.S., she'd spent 5 years working as a private investigator in Kingston, Jamaica. She wasn't just good with a mop, she was trained to see what others missed, to stay calm under pressure, to prepare for moments just like this. And what she had felt the first time she entered Preston's apartment, the coldness, the emptiness, it wasn't just the decor. It was the man himself. She'd sensed his paranoia, the performative charm he wore when his nanny or driver were present, and the disdain that returned when they were gone. So she'd done what she always did when something didn't sit right. She'd hit record. Her phone clipped to her belt under her sweater had been recording from the moment she walked in. Everything was on file: his accusations, the crying child, the confrontation in the nursery, and most importantly, the exact moment he threatened to ruin her life with no proof whatsoever. But Danielle didn't plan to use it, not yet, because there was something in his tone, some smug certainty that made her believe he had more to lose than just a watch. And if she waited, if she stayed quiet just a little longer, he might show his hand. Just then, Preston's phone buzzed. A message preview popped up. Private investigator urgent. Call me ASAP. It's about your wife. He paled. Danielle noticed even though she pretended not to. Do you need a moment, Mr. Blackstone? She asked politely with just enough bite to make him blink. No, I'm fine, he lied, slipping the phone into his pocket even as his hands trembled slightly. Danielle slung her cleaning kit over her shoulder. If you're still planning to involve the police, I suggest we do it now. I'd like to review the building's security footage with them, just to be thorough. Preston hesitated. Security cameras. Hadn't even thought of that. Danielle offered a small, knowing smile. They'll show exactly when I entered, where I went, and that I haven't left since arriving. They might even show what really happened to that watch. He didn't answer. Couldn't. And in that silence, Danielle turned and walked toward the door, but not before saying one last thing. Oh, and Mr. Blackstone, people who weaponize lies usually forget one thing. She opened the door, looked him straight in the eye. The truth always leaves footprints. Then she left him standing there, clutching his phone, the weight of his unraveling world just beginning to settle on his shoulders. Danielle didn't look back as she stepped into the hallway. She didn't have to. She could feel Preston's confusion, his shame disguised as rage clinging to the air behind her. Like smoke from a fire he didn't yet realize he'd started himself. As she pressed the elevator button, she let herself breathe deeply, not out of relief, but strategy. This wasn't over. Not even close. By the time she reached the lobby, her phone was already in her hand. She dialed one number, her sister Camille. Hey, Camille answered quickly. You good, I'm fine, Danielle replied. But I need a favor. Camille didn't hesitate. Tell me, remember that private security course I took in Kingston before I moved here? You were top of the class. Why I need you to reach out to our old instructor, Detective Julian. Tell him Danielle Brooks needs a fast favor access to security footage from a building in Manhattan. Building name is Blackstone Towers. There was a short pause. You're calling this in? Danielle glanced back at the elevator doors. I think it's time. I didn't come here to get humiliated for doing honest work. If Preston wants a war, he picked the wrong woman. Back upstairs, Preston stood frozen in the nursery, Thomas still crying softly in the crib. The message from the private investigator hadn't gone away. Urgent. About your wife. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone and finally dialed back. Mr. Blackstone, the investigator said quickly. We have a situation. Preston's voice cracked. What kind of situation? Your wife is not in Miami with her mother. She's been in Las Vegas for 3 weeks. With another man. It was like something snapped in his chest. That's impossible, he murmured. She FaceTimes me every night. They're routed through masking apps. We have hotel records, photos, timestamps. It's real. Preston dropped into the nearest chair. All the fire from earlier had vanished, replaced by something cold, damp, hollow. He stared at the wall in silence, the echo of Danielle's calm voice playing again in his mind. Maybe you should check your car. Your pockets. She had known. Somehow she had known. Down in the building's parking lot, security guard Miguel had just returned from patrol when he spotted something under a black Mercedes, the glint of gold against the pavement. He picked it up, turned it over, and his eyebrows shot up. A Rolex Submariner. He radioed it in. 20 minutes later, 2 NYPD detectives, Rodriguez and Hale, arrived at Preston's apartment, responding to the reported theft. Preston tried to compose himself, still reeling from the news about his wife. She stole it, he said, his voice unsteady. The cleaning lady. Do you have any evidence? Detective Rodriguez asked. She was the only one who went in the closet. And when did you last see the watch? Hale asked, pen in hand. Preston hesitated. Last night. I think. On the nightstand. The detectives exchanged a glance. Rodriguez spoke calmly. Mr. Blackstone, we've already reviewed the building security feed. Miss Brooks arrived at 9:02 a.m. She's not once left the building since. Meanwhile, footage from 11:43 p.m. last night shows you exiting your car and dropping something shiny under it. Hale reached into a plastic evidence bag and held up the Rolex. Found under your car this morning by building security. Sir, you may want to reconsider your accusation. Preston's face drained of color. His jaw opened, but no words came out. The humiliation burned through him like acid. And the worst part, Danielle had known. Not just where the watch would be, but how all of this would play out. She had played it calmly with the precision of someone who had been here before, someone who had learned the hard way that being underestimated could be turned into power. As Detective Hale finished filing the report, Preston looked down at the Rolex in the evidence bag, his $50,000 lie, and for the first time in a very long while, he felt something he wasn't used to. Powerless. And this was only the beginning. Because while Preston scrambled to stop the bleeding, Danielle was already preparing her next move. The cab ride from Blackstone Towers to Harlem was quiet save for the soft hum of city traffic and the occasional buzz of Danielle's phone. Camille had followed up. Detective Julian was on it. Danielle had expected nothing less. That man ran his investigations like a surgeon, precise, quiet, and absolutely lethal when needed. She glanced out the window, her fingers still tingling from the confrontation. It wasn't fear, it was momentum. She'd been patient for too long, working silently, enduring subtle digs and overt suspicion because she needed the money, the visa, the chance. But that was the old Danielle, the one who thought playing small meant staying safe. Preston Blackstone had just reminded her why silence never saved anyone. When she stepped into her modest apartment, Camille was already on a video call with her. Julian needs the exact timestamp and the camera ID, she said. He'll get legal access in under an hour if you can send that. I'll pull it now, Danielle said, already switching to her work tablet. She had been keeping quiet but not blind. After years of cleaning for the wealthy, she'd learned to document everything: photos, timestamps, even environmental audio. Not because she expected conflict, but because she had seen too many women like her get blamed when things went wrong. She opened the file labeled Blackstone, Routine Logs, and exported the metadata. Every shift was recorded. Every room entered was listed. Even the exact moment she'd gone to check on the crying baby. She zipped the files and emailed them to Camille. "Tell Julian he'll have more than enough," she said. Camille smiled proud. "You sure you're ready for this?" Danielle paused. He started it. Meanwhile, Preston sat in his dimly lit kitchen, both hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee he hadn't touched. The detectives were gone, and so was the illusion of control. Everything had cracked open. His marriage, his ego, his image. All of it stained by his own arrogance. He had accused a woman, humiliated her in his home, and all because of what a watch he forgot he dropped. He picked up the Rolex from the counter, turning it over slowly in his hands. It still gleamed, still looked powerful. But in that moment it felt like a curse. Proof of how easily he had assumed the worst, how confidently he had wrapped his failure in blame. The silence was broken by his phone ringing again. Not his wife this time. Not even his lawyer. A name he didn't recognize, Dr. Evelyn Monroe, Office of Workplace Ethics. He stared at it confused, then let it go to voicemail. Then another buzz. This time a message from HR. Subject: formal notice of internal review. Preston clicked it open. There was a file attached, a request for a meeting, an outline of a complaint, and worst of all, a copy of the NYPD report from earlier that day. Someone had submitted it, officially, and he knew who. Danielle wasn't just walking away from this. She was building something from it. Back in Harlem, Danielle had changed into a fresh blouse and jeans. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at her desk. The tablet pinged. A message from Julian: footage secured. Matches your timeline perfectly. Want me to move forward with the cross-check? She typed back yes. And dig into Blackstone. I want to know everything. Another message came through, this time from someone unexpected. Dr. Marcus Ellis, a civil rights attorney who had worked with Julian in the past. Saw the footage. You held your ground with impressive calm. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk about what comes next. This might be bigger than you think. Danielle sat back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about a watch anymore. It never was. It was about what happens when power forgets that some people come prepared and others come transformed. And Preston Blackstone had just made the worst mistake of his life, thinking Danielle Brooks was easy to break. She wasn't. She was just getting started. That night, Harlem was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that made every decision feel louder. Danielle stood by her apartment window, watching the lights of the city flicker through the blinds. She hadn't replied to Dr. Ellis yet. Part of her still hesitated because once you step into the spotlight, there's no retreating to silence. But another part, the part sharpened by years of being overlooked, dismissed, and doubted, was already leaning forward. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from anyone official. It was a text from Rosa, a housekeeper she'd worked with years ago, now doing weekend shifts at another luxury building uptown. Girl, saw your name in the union group chat. Everyone's talking. We're proud of you. Danielle smiled softly. The message wasn't long, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. She picked up her phone and typed a reply to Dr. Ellis. Let's talk tomorrow. Meanwhile, across town, Preston sat alone in his penthouse office, the walls closing in more with every unread email. His wife still hadn't called. The HR complaint had triggered internal audits, and his assistant had texted earlier to say 3 junior staffers had filed for anonymous leave, one of them citing hostile work culture under executive management. The facade was crumbling, fast. But Preston's pride hadn't yet caught up with reality. Somewhere in the twisted vaults of his ego, he still believed he could fix this with the right spin. He opened his laptop and began typing an email titled, "Clarification regarding misunderstanding." Halfway through, he stopped, because that's what this was to him, a misunderstanding. But to Danielle, it had been something else entirely. The sound of his own breathing was suddenly deafening. He closed the laptop and leaned back, eyes stinging. The walls had mirrors now. They didn't show him the man he told himself he was. They showed him the man Danielle had seen, the one who accused, first listened, never, and thought power meant always being right. That image was harder to look at than any headline. Back in Harlem, Camille had returned to Danielle's apartment with takeout. They ate on the couch like they used to back in Kingston, knees curled under blankets. Laughter layered over old reggae songs playing faintly from Camille's phone. But the laughter faded when Danielle checked her inbox again. There it was, a direct message from a former intern at Blackstone Capital. Young, white, female, anonymous account. Saw what happened. Just want you to know he did similar things to others. Not just cleaners, interns, assistants. I was too scared to speak. But I'll support you if you go public. Danielle stared at the message for a long moment. Camille leaned over. You okay? She nodded. I think I finally understand why this happened. Camille raised an eyebrow. Because of a watch, no, Danielle whispered. Because people like Preston are used to women like me disappearing, staying silent, leaving the mess behind while they keep their jobs, their reputations, their power. But this time the story didn't end there. Camille smiled. This time the story just started. Danielle picked up her phone again, opened a new email to Dr. Ellis and typed, "Let's go public. But on my terms." Across the city, the sun began to rise, early morning light, casting a pale gold across the skyline. In a quiet penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Preston Blackstone poured himself another drink, but it didn't taste like control anymore. It tasted like defeat. And in a small apartment in Harlem, Danielle Brooks laced up her sneakers, tied her hair back, and stepped into the hallway, not to run away, but to step forward, because the world was finally watching. And this time she had the mic. The next morning, Danielle arrived early at the law office of Dr. Marcus Ellis. The building was quiet, nestled in a brownstone-lined street in the Upper West Side, a far cry from the glass towers where people like Preston ruled from their thrones. But here everything felt grounded, real. Maya Thompson was already waiting, coffee in hand, and a stack of documents neatly organized on the conference table. We've drafted a preliminary statement, she said, gesturing toward the folder. You can revise anything, or scrap it entirely, but this gives you a starting point. Danielle took a seat, eyes scanning the bolded headline at the top: Housekeeper files formal complaint against billionaire executive for false accusation and retaliation. She exhaled slowly. I never thought I'd see my name in something like this, she murmured. Dr. Ellis smiled gently. Sometimes the people who least expect the spotlight are the ones who deserve it most. Danielle nodded. She wasn't doing this for fame or revenge. She was doing it for every woman who'd ever had her dignity questioned in silence, for every immigrant who kept their head down to survive, for herself. I'm ready, she said. Meanwhile, across town, Preston was anything but. He stood before a conference room full of lawyers and board members, his tie loosened, jaw tight. Margaret Chun sat at the head of the table, arms folded, expression unreadable. We're trying to contain this, she said coolly. But the press got wind of the NYPD report. And now with this attorney, this Brooks woman, going public. Her name is Danielle Preston, interrupted, instantly regretting the familiarity in his tone. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Right, Danielle. The woman you accused without evidence, who now has video timestamps, witness statements, and your watch found under your own damn car. One of the lawyers slid a printed headline across the table. Cleaning lady or corporate hero, viral case sparks workplace reckoning. The headline alone made Preston's stomach knot, but it was the photo beneath it that made his chest tighten. It was Danielle, composed, confident, and clear-eyed, as she walked out of the press briefing. Her posture didn't just say, I'm not afraid. It said, I know exactly what I'm doing. Another lawyer added quietly, and there's chatter of other employees preparing statements. Interns, assistants. Seems this case cracked the dam. Preston slumped back in his chair. He was no longer the storm. He was in the eye of it. Back at Ellis and Thompson LLP, the legal team worked late into the evening, while Danielle reviewed the final version of her public statement. Camille arrived with dinner and a grin. You're trending, she said, holding up her phone. Hashtag Danielle Brooks is everywhere. Danielle blinked. I didn't want this to go viral. I know, Camille replied, but maybe it had to. That night, Danielle recorded a short video from the firm's media room. No makeup team, no lights, just her in her own words. My name is Danielle Brooks. I came to this country with hope. I worked hard, I stayed quiet, And I believed doing things the right way would keep me safe. But sometimes silence doesn't protect you. It just makes you invisible. And I refuse to be invisible anymore. The video was posted the next morning. Within hours, it had been shared over 100,000 times. Celebrities, journalists, civil rights leaders, people from every walk of life echoed her story. And while Danielle stayed focused, Preston watched the fallout unfold like an avalanche he had no hope of outrunning. He flipped through news segments, reading comments he couldn't unsee. Finally, someone stood up. This isn't just her story, it's ours. Danielle Brooks didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. And somewhere between rage and regret, Preston realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a PR crisis. This was a reckoning in Danielle Brooks. She had become the symbol of everything he never thought would touch him: accountability. Preston Blackstone no longer recognized the man staring back at him in the mirror. 3 weeks had passed since Danielle's video reverberated across the internet, and in that time the world he once ruled with unshakable confidence had begun to erode beneath his feet. The suspension came swiftly accompanied by whispers in boardrooms, cautious glances from colleagues, and mounting pressure from investors whose faith now hung by a thread. Two more formal complaints surfaced, one from a former intern, the other from a junior executive assistant, each echoing the same undercurrent that Preston Blackstone's influence was not just overbearing, but corrosive. Still, what unraveled him wasn't the headlines or the threat of lawsuits, it was the silence. The kind of silence that filled a room when people no longer respected you enough to argue, when they no longer feared you enough to flatter. He was now an empty suit in his own office, greeted not with reverence but with detachment. And in the quiet, Preston finally began to hear the sound he had ignored for years, the slow, steady cracking of the foundation he'd built on unchecked power and entitlement. While Preston grappled with a crumbling image, Danielle Brooks was quietly building something stronger. The woman who once navigated penthouse suites in near invisibility was now seated at round tables beside attorneys, labor organizers, and advocacy groups. Her story no longer just her own, but a catalyst for conversations long overdue. After her video gained traction, she declined most media requests, choosing instead to focus on structural change. She collaborated with Maya's firm to develop a legal toolkit for domestic and hourly workers' guidelines on documentation, legal recourse, and how to quietly protect one's rights when no one else would. One evening, as she returned from a workshop in the Bronx, Danielle found Camille lounging on her couch, casually flipping through the mail. With a raised eyebrow and that familiar mischievous grin, Camille held up a cream-colored envelope. "You got something?" she said. "Looks serious." Danielle took it with mild suspicion. "Don't tell me someone's suing me for being too composed?" Camille laughed. "Worse. Someone's thanking you." Inside was a handwritten letter from Rosa, the longtime housekeeper who had once sent a simple message of solidarity. But this time Rosa shared her own story, how, inspired by Danielle's courage, she had confronted her employer about unpaid overtime and disrespect, and for the first time in years, walked out of a meeting with both back pay and dignity. Danielle blinked back, the heat rising in her eyes. This was the real reward. Not trending hashtags, not applause, but knowing that her quiet resistance had lit a path for someone else to follow, someone who may have never dared speak otherwise. Elsewhere in the city, Preston sat once again in the nursery, watching his son sleep with the kind of awe usually reserved for strangers. Thomas, once calmed so easily in Danielle's arms, now flinched at Preston's touch, turning instead to the nanny whose face he associated with safety. Preston's attempts at repair felt clumsy, like trying to glue back something shattered without understanding why it broke. The watch, the Rolex, sat in a drawer now out of sight. It no longer gleamed with status but haunted him with its weight, a symbol of everything he had lost by refusing to look beyond his own certainty. Meanwhile, Danielle passed by Blackstone Towers on her way home, not with resentment, but with perspective. The building still shimmered in the evening light, tall and impersonal as ever, but it no longer intimidated her. It was just glass and stone, incapable of judgment, indifferent to the change happening beyond its walls. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. "They're forming a civilian oversight committee for tenant and worker protections. They want you to join." Danielle didn't answer immediately. She slipped her phone into her coat pocket, exhaled into the cold air, and kept walking. She didn't need a title or a platform to make an impact. She had already proven that a calm voice, when backed by truth and preparation, could shake towers. And in a city full of noise, her quiet strength had become impossible to ignore. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters just like hers did.